Hi guys, this is SDJRSNF88 speaking with a tutorial on how to fit a block signalling shuttle system to your layout. So what is a shuttle system? A shuttle system is basically a unit that controls a train automatically backwards and forwards on a single section of line. So this is perfect for little micro layouts and branch lines which don't run in a continuous loop. Now the unit we're using today is made by BLOCKsignalling, and as you can see it is an SS2A DC Shuttle with acceleration. And basically this unit is a controller and a shuttle unit all built into one. So with some shuttle units you need to have a normal controller to provide the speed control, but with this it is all built into this one unit. So without further ado, we're going to open up the packet and take a look what you get inside. So here is a closer look at the unit itself, and as you can see we got a little socket here for the power supply. We then have a number of little ports here. Now this is obviously for the wires from the track, so this is where the power to the track is going to go from. Then we have two little dials on this side, one labelled speed and the other labelled time. Now these can be adjusted with a screwdriver, and the one that says speed is your speed control, much like on your normal train set controller. And you basically adjust this to the speed you want the locomotive to run at. And when the locomotive is on the shuttle, it will gradually build up speed until it reaches the speed you set it at, and then when it gets to the other end of the line, it will then stop, and then it will wait, and then it will return back, gradually accelerating to that same speed in the opposite direction until it gets back to where it started. Now the time dial, now that adjusts the stoppage time at each end of the layout, so this could be from a couple of seconds to maybe a minute or so. And again, these are both adjusted by a screwdriver, and you preset these, and then once you've set them, you just switch on the power and let the train automatically run back and forth. Now also included in the set are these two little diodes. Now these need to be soldered to the track as seen in the instructions, and basically this tells the unit when the locomotive is at each stopping point. So once the locomotive's crossed this point, the loco will then stop, and then it will wait there for the set time you set it at, and then there'll be a spurt of power into that section of track, and the train will then leave the section back in the opposite direction to where it started. So let's take a closer look at some of the items you'll need to attach this unit to your layout. First of all, as mentioned, you'll need a power supply. Now this is a 12 volt 1 amp wall plug as recommended by the instructions in the unit. We then of course have a set of screwdrivers. Now this is for attaching the dropper wires from the rails, which is basically where the power will come from the unit into the rails to run the actual train. Then we have a small handrail set. Now this is optional. As mentioned, the diodes you solder to the side of the rails to perform the brake, and obviously this is detected by the unit, which will then shuttle the train back. Now you can solder them straight to the side of the rails, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide them underneath the baseboards. So this little drill will be perfect for drilling down through the baseboards and then threading the diodes through so they're out of sight on the top of the layout. But again, this is all optional. We then of course have some sturdy track cutters. This is of course going to be key for providing the split in the rails, which is what the diodes then going to go over the top of. We then have some wire cutters. Now these are going to be handy for holding the diodes in place while I'm trying to solder them to the side of the track, and of course trimming off the ends as well. And then of course the most important tool is of course the soldering iron. Now I'm very new to soldering, so this could be my first main soldering project, so don't be put off if you've not done much soldering, because basically for this tutorial I'm going to be in the same boat. So hopefully it'll be a nice simple job, and I'm very much looking forward to getting started. So the first thing to do is of course get that split in the track and get those diodes connected. So the first step is of course to create the break in the rail by using the track cutters, and basically this means cutting off this section of rail on one side at either end, and basically the idea is to make a nice clean cut so no power can jump from the main rail, which will of course have the power from the unit, to the section which the train is of course going to stop on. Now before you make your cut, you've got to think wisely and make sure you leave enough room for your train to stop. So in this case, I'm only going to be using small tank engines. Probably the largest would be a small 060. So I've taken into account a short little runoff, so in case there's a bit of deceleration from the locomotive, and of course the sort of wheel space of the locomotive as well. So basically all the wheels with all the pickups are off of the main section. So I've chosen to cut the rails about here. So without further ado, if I get the track cutters there, get a nice grip on the rail, hopefully you'll be able to see this, give it a nice, and there we go. We lost a bit of ballast there, but that's fine. That will provide a nice little cover for our diode, which is going to go in that little gap there. And as you can see, there's now a clean break in the rails, and this will now be connected together with this little diode here, which will then breach the gap and allow the train to pick up power and obviously return back down the shuttle in the other way. So the next step is to measure out the other end, including the space for the wagon this time, as the locomotive will be parked here and the wagon will be on this side, so the locomotive will be at this end of the platform pushing a wagon into the sidings. So the idea will be I'll leave a bit more of a runoff at this end to allow a wagon to fit in to the section with, of course, the locomotive. So as mentioned earlier on in this tutorial, I mentioned about drilling holes in the baseboards and threading the diodes up through so they're hidden underneath the board itself. Now one thing I didn't take into account, especially at the platform end, is that one of the main wooden supports for the layout is actually underneath here, which means I won't be able to thread the diode down underneath the baseboard. So what I'm going to do instead is going to go for the simpler method and actually just solder the diode directly to the side of the track, like so. Now as you can see, once it's going to be soldered in, hopefully it will blend in quite nicely with the layout and won't stand out too much. It sort of looks like a little bit of apparatus that you'll find on the side of a track anyway, and I'm sure with a bit of weathering it'll blend in quite nicely. So rather than drilling through the baseboard and having trouble chipping out all the wood underneath there, I'm just going to go ahead and simply just solder these diodes to either side of the rail. So before we attach the diode, as per the instructions, we have to make sure it's facing around the right way. Now as you can see, if I pick it up here, you'll notice there is a silver band at one end, which in this case is on the left hand side. Now we've got to make sure the diode at the opposite end is also facing the same direction, or otherwise the system won't work, and from what I understand is the train will just continue on and off the end of the baseboard. So anyway, so what I'm going to do is basically place it alongside the track like so. I'm then going to gradually heat up the solder and heat up the little wire and the bit of track there before I start applying the flux, or the solder I should say. And I'm going to be using lead-free solder wire, and what I'm going to do is once this area is heated, I'm going to gradually apply a little tiny tap of solder, just enough to hold it, and gradually work it into the rails. Now I'm not going to talk during this bit, because I'll be handling a hot soldering iron, and also as well I'm going to be concentrating a lot here, as this is my main first soldering project as mentioned, and I don't want to make any mistakes. So without further ado, let's get on with the soldering. Right, so we're now back, and as you can see the sun has come out, and the diodes are now in place. For my first attempt at soldering, I'm very pleased with how they have turned out, and you can see they're now soldered at either end to the sides of the rails. The next step, of course, is now to wire in the unit itself and basically plug it into the mains and see if it all works. So I've carefully followed the diagram provided, and as you can see, we've got these two wires here, which are our wires coming from the track, and these are the two wires here. And I've made sure that these wires have gone into the correct ports as shown on the diagram. So the black wire here is the wire that leads to the rail with the two diodes on, so this wire on the right. And I've made sure that's gone into the right port and the other wire has gone into the left port. I've also plugged in the socket to the mains. As you can see, and as I mentioned earlier on, it would have originally gone in these two little sockets here, but this is an updated unit, so it's now got its own separate plug. So the next thing to do is obviously put a loco on the track, and once that's on the track, I can then start adjusting these two little dials here and hopefully get a train running. So of course the loco in question is the trusted Hornby Peckett, and as you can see, she's looking really smart on the layout here, paired up with a couple of Oxford Rail open wagons. One standing in the cattle dock and the other one she'll be shuttling hopefully back and forth along the layout. So without further ado, we're going to switch on the power and adjust the settings and see if we can get her to shuttle back and forth. Right, so as you can see, we now have power to the unit, as noted by this little flashing LED on there. And what I've gone and done is I've turned both the dials to the far left. So the timing is on the lowest time setting there is for the stoppage time, and the speed control is completely off. So in theory, if I start turning the speed dial, which is the one on the left, up, the train should start moving. So without further ado, I slowly turn it to the right. Should be putting power into the track. And in theory, there we go. Now the engine has stopped, and that has nothing to do with me, and in theory, would you look at that? There we go, and again, I didn't do anything. And now hopefully, there we go. And you can see the engine is completely shuttling backwards and forwards of its own accord on the layout. Really is quite amazing. So there we go. I guess the next thing to do is obviously to get a few clips of her running back and forth on the layout, and of course as well adjusting the times, so you can make the stoppage time, which she's doing now, you can make this time slightly longer so she can sit in the station for a couple of seconds or a couple of minutes before heading back in the opposite direction. And then once that's all sorted, I'm happy with the settings. I'm going to get some sticky back pads and stick the unit to the underside of the baseboard, and that will be it. Hopefully the unit will fit back in the box with the layout, and it's ready to go. So there you have it, my tutorial on how to fit the BLOCKsignalling DC Shuttle System with speed control. Now this little unit really does add a whole new dimension to the operational potential of this layout, and I hope you agree. It really was a fun and simple unit to fit, and I highly recommend it to anyone that has a little micro layout like this, or even a larger branch line system so you can shuttle trains back and forth from one end of your layout to another. It really is a great little product. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and I hope it was of interest, and I guess that's all that's left for me to say is this has been SDJR Son F88 speaking, and thanks for watching.